set to record again.
Is it, John? Is it this month? Is that Africa? Just past the first and waiting for the second.
No,
That's
just
a bit of a sort out to
pieces
see what I can do.
of the Ephraim stuff passed over to Tony. Because
I don't know, I was thinking about rummaging through my income bits and
he was
see how many African countries I could find.
the goings on.
Ah, yeah, but that's all around the world, that's not just Africa.
Everybody sent him.
Oh, yes, yeah, but that kind of, I think I was just thinking of
Among other things, you know, I saw
African
that
Gold
paper
Coast,
shop
yeah.
he died, and most of them went to the University of Hardware.
I'm going to need ideas for displays in November
But I
22.
kept all the Biafran stuff.
So if we could put that in the newsletter next time, that would be good.
Where were we?
Is that everybody's going to display?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get going with Peter then.
216 is 30.
Are you ready, Ray?
So I said, well,
Yeah. Okay, so if you can give that microphone to Peter.
Oh yes. Sorry. That's the stuff from Barbara.
Okay. No, you just hold
Just
it.
hold it. Okay.
Hold on a moment.
Sorry, there's one more frame to go on.
Yes, man.
Gold Coast used in Antigua.
Oh, right, okay.
It's a job to know with some of these funny postmarks, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've had some of these for 40, 50 years. And all you used to do was stick them in the album and write underneath,
Yep.
you know, Lagos or wherever the stamp came from. And then you look at them, having read loads of articles about forgeries, you start to look at things in a different light, don't you? Did that really go to Antigua?
Yeah.
How could a Gold Coast stamp get cancelled in Antigua?
Has it got
Well,
to Antigua and it hadn't already been cancelled? I don't know.
Well,
That's what
redirected when it went.
home for.
I think we've all got these random things.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can remember in my odds and sods bit, I've got a GB King George VI stamp postmarked Aura, Nigeria. It's been there for probably getting on 50 years.
Yes, I've got Trinidad and Tobago used in Newport Isle of Wight.
Yes.
Well, exactly. Being a lesson to me, because I've learned over the years that whenever I throw something out,
That's the thing you want, yeah. Well, Barry's certainly an expert at that. You're an expert at not throwing things out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like throwing things out.
throw things out.
Well, recycle.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay.
Okay, first up is Peter. Sorry, before you get to your frames, I'll just mention that carry on. I've got a group of handouts for orders of Marty Bratzel's book. So if any payment of these is directly to Marty Bratzel, so if anybody's minded to buy that book, you need to take one of these yellow handouts.
Don't forget, Barbara already paid us at Redditch.
Yeah, you've got yours, haven't you, Barbara?
I have, yes.
Yep, good. That's sorted.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, it's all right. Yeah, I'm just making an announcement about Marty Bratzel's book. Marty Bratzel's book, Cameroon. Okay, Peter.
Okay, everybody. Right, well, today, everything I've got two things in common. One, it's Sportsfield Airmail. Secondly, it is all stuff that I either acquired or wrote up over the sourceful period with all the new so no one can challenge it. And we're going to start in 1934 with an airmail going from the UK to Nigeria. Now, if you look at Post Office records, no airmail rate was quoted for Nigeria until the Imperial Service started in February 1936. What they've done is they've charged it at a rate of 1 and 8. And I reckon the way they got to that was they charged it at the rate of 10pence to Sierra Leone, which was quoted, and then doubled it because it tripped over the half ounce. 1937, we get something called the All Up War Empire airmail scheme. Only one thing, it didn't apply to West Africa. However, I've got a cover here, which has gone at 3 halfpence. It's clearly been flown into Nigeria, and no postage due has been charged. So I think there must have been a bit of confusion at the start of the scheme being introduced. Next cover leaves Nigeria on the 23rd of August, 1939, no censorship. Gets to Khartoum on the 25th of August, 1939, censorship has just been introduced. So what happens is that the Khartoum censor grabs hold of it and puts his mark on instead of a Nigerian mark. Now, over this period, I've been spending a few sessions with Gavin Fryer. I've known Gavin since I was about 12, the junior member of Working in District Philatelic Society. But I went down to do a few sessions with Gareth with him because he lives about 10 minutes down the road from me. And he pulled out something called The History of the Postal and Telegraph Department, 1938 to 1946. And in it, for each of the West African colonies, it's got detail of the censorship arrangements for World War II. Now, if you look in the censorship book that we publish, there's lots of this sort of thing for the First World War, nothing much for the Second World War. So I put the Sierra Leone one, I've blown it up and put it on a sheet. Gavin assures me that these came from a collection of papers that are still technically classified. So if MI5 grab me on the way home, you'll know what's happened.
We'll bear you out.
Okay. Then we come to, I think, my best find over the pandemic period. Airmail letters. Airmail letters printed for the troops in West Africa. They overprinted some with the Honour Declaration and the blue triangle on the front. First ones they did were on existing UK ones. There's one there. But they obviously overdid that a bit because they then went and cancelled a load of the Honour Declarations on the rest of them, so they must have run out of the standard envelope. Then they overprinted on letters that had actually been printed in West Africa. Now, if I tell you that there's 2 books on this, there's a book by a man called Lee, written about 1984, and there's the Danes and Lucci book written in 2006. The top one, both of them could only find as a front, so that's the first time anyone's found one with the Honour Declaration on the back. The second type is totally unrecorded. Out of his correspondence as well, there's an air letter there with an unrecorded censor mark. But when you read the letter, he's not on British territory. He's somewhere French. I think that's actually been written from the Ivory Coast. A couple of airmail items going into Sierra Leone, unusual returned item. Yeah. So in 1944, all the West African colonies introduced a concessionary air letter rate of 4p to troops, West African troops serving abroad. I've had a couple of examples from Nigeria for a while, but I managed to obtain a couple of examples from the Gold Coast, and they're there. Moving over now to matters French, 10th of June 1940, letter from the Gold Coast addressed to Paris. What happened 4 days later? The Germans walked into Paris. Yes. But I think that got through. The reason why is round the back, but you have to be able to write without printing in French. If anyone wants it, I'll explain that. Then there's 4 covers there, which are about the period in the second half of 1940, when the Free French and the Vichy French are basically fighting for control in West Africa, and the difficulties that gave to the airmail service. A cover that's been sent back from Senegal to Switzerland, but via the British Post Office in Tangier and Lisbon. A couple of unusual French censored items. A postcard going from Nigeria into France in 1944, when the regulations said postcards only because of the liberation position. A couple of South Atlantic covers. Top one coming from Brazil to South Africa, Usually when you get these, if they're stamped at all in West Africa, it's Lagos or Leopoldville. This one, for some unknown reason, has ended up in Monrovia, in Liberia. Airmail from Afghanistan via West Africa, 1943. And the last cover is a sensor cover. It's a Gold Coast transitory sensor on a letter coming out of the Belgian Congo. But the letter is from an outfit called Union Minière du Haut-Katanga in Jadotville, down in the south. Now, let's see. Does anybody know what the significance of this company is to the Second World War?
Uranium.
These were the people that had the uranium mine at Chimbaluki, which is where virtually all the uranium that was used on the Manhattan Project came. I read a very good book over the summer called Spies in the Congo about all the stuff that went on with it. And one of the things that you will notice if you look at the Sierra Leone notice about censorship is the emphasis put on mail coming out of Portuguese colonies. And one of the reasons for that was the Americans were scared stiff that what the Union Minière were doing was, yes, selling them uranium, but also selling the Germans uranium, sending it out through Portuguese colonies. So that's what that's about. So sorry, it's a bit of an all over the place selection, but I hope you enjoy it. Cheers.
Can you grab the mic? Yep.
Okay, the title for this ought to be "Even the Dogs Can Eat the Scraps from the Master's Table." Otherwise known as what I found in a big box of covers.
Cheeky.
Because the room auction in Redditch, there was a large box of mostly modern Nigerian covers was offered, and nobody else wanted it. Graham definitely didn't want to take it back to Bolton, so I risked my 25-year marriage and purchased it. Then discovered that Rob and Paul had already been through it, so hence the scraps from the Master's Tables. Of course, Paul's just published his book, so I was able to check the covers against the dates and things that are in his book. I did find a few things that weren't in, so some of those are up here. Basically, the Jones numbers for classifying Nigeria postmarks have now got up to about 140. I'm not going to bore you with all of them. There's three main types I've shown here. There's a large single circle type with writing around the rim, 131, 132 I think. Then there's some more large single circles, so they've got writing horizontally inside the circle, up to 5 lines. Tend to be the bigger offices, and they have the name of the place, and then things like HO and Mails 1, and of course the date. Finally, skeletons, and Paul's introduced J138 as a catch-all for all the skeletons that don't match older types of skeleton, at least with regards to the wording. Some of the older postmarks from the 60s and 70s were still in use. I've got a few date extensions I'll let Paul have. Highlights, probably marks from 2 offices that aren't recorded in Paul's book. One is a place called Abaji, which is a branch office in Abuja. That's a skeleton type. And then there is mark from the Baptist Theological College in Oyo. We haven't found that in any of the lists, although I think Rob might have it in a to be sorted pile. The college existed for training the ministers for many years, and it was constituted under that name about 2000. It changed its name, I think it was able to award degrees. It's got a website, and it clearly there was a post office with its name running in 2005. Thank you.
Afternoon. I've just got 3 sheets to show. So Peter, complete your 1934 to Nigeria. Here's 1928 to Nigeria.
By Dakar.
Via Dakar, of course, yes. However, as you rightly say, there was no published rate to Nigeria. So what the sender has done is paid the airmail rate to Dakar and then the surface mail rate from France to Nigeria, giving a total of £7.50. The ML rate being £6 for 10 to 20 grams and £1.50 for up to 20 grams for the surface mail. So a nice cover, possibly as early as they get for commercial covers into Nigeria. I don't know of any earlier one, and therefore that's a challenge to anybody who collects the MLs of West Africa. What's nice from my point of view is, well, firstly, that Barbara pointed me in this direction because she couldn't find a way of buying it on the web. So, thank you very much, Barbara. It wasn't that difficult for me.
It was my own incompetence of being unable to deal with Del Camp and PayPal at the same time. It was my...
The other nice thing from my point of view is that Goody, which was a railway station on the Eastern Railway, had a post office which opened in around early 1928 anyway. And the arrival postmark on this cover is Goody, 7th of September 1928. So a very early Goody postmark as well. Which leaves me with a problem: which collection do I put it in? Nice problem to have.
We put it in both.
Yeah.
Display.
The other two sheets are a correspondence, well, sort of a correspondence, 3 covers from the same correspondence with 1 letter, which relate to the establishment of Pan Am Africa in 1941. So it's preparations for the Pan Am Africa route. So there's one particular person here, a chap called Clarence Linnenbach, who was sent out there, flown by Clipper, and he describes his journey by Clipper in the first letter. And he then says what the Pan Am Africa are up to, which is pretty naughty. That particular letter was opened by Examiner in Gold Coast and passed. So somebody hadn't realised the significance. You then have a difference in the way these were handled. So the first one here was opened by Century Gold Coast, stampless. Second one had a stamp on but not postmarked, which probably means it was carried privately by Pan Am Africa or Pan Am across the Atlantic to the USA without going through the Gold Coast Post Office despite having a Gold Coast stamp. And the third one was paid 6 cents in manuscript and then passed by the US Army censor in Gold Coast, which presumably means it's the third one of them after the whole thing had been set up. Thank you.
That's me. Have I got to hold that? What have I
Yes,
got to do with it?
Just hold it, it's a microphone. Yeah. So just hold on to it.
Not used to this. Peter's appeared. I did think at one stage that he was going to be here. I think twice in a row that I was going to show something partially for his benefit, which and he wasn't here. But this is a collection of Gold Coast postmarks on stamps, which you can obviously see what they are, mainly Queen Victoria. And my excuse for bringing them today was a discussion with Peter at Redditch about such matters, and so I thought I would lump them together and bring them along for you to have a look at today. So basically this is how I got started 50 years ago or thereabouts. So in the late 60s, most of you can remember the 60s, I purchased my first Gold Coast stamps. And at the same time, I obtained the early monographs. But I got my old copies out last night. The first one of these was by Cameron, who went up to the end of Queen Victoria. They were followed in 1971 by McRae, who listed up right up to Type 21, which I think at the time was the end of the Gold Coast numbering system. This has, of course, been followed by the excellent work of Mr. Mackin and Mr. Anderson in more recent years. So I thought, looking through this Cameron listing, that I would start collecting examples of the various villages listed by each type, and basically putting them into albums. These over the years have been taken out of the albums and stuck on better sheets. In 1971, I saw advertised a Gold Coast collection, which were with a well-known dealer in North London. So I went along one morning to have a look at said collection, of which I bought a number of the bits in it. And I think virtually all of the ones from, and it was 50 years ago in June, because part of the story I was going to tell, but we haven't got time, that the day I went to see the said dealer, my first daughter was born. And I had this very tricky situation in the hospital in Henley, watching my clock, waiting for the end of visiting. My newborn daughter was here, my car was out there, and London was down there, and how was I going to get away to look at these stamps? Terrible story, isn't it? Now, in this collection, the person, I don't know idea where it came from, that they'd already made a start in collecting Victorian Gold Coast stamps with the various village postmarks. So I've tried to expand this, and I had in the 70s, this, as I say, this is how I started, and this is how the collection expanded. And then, of course, postal history came in, and most of this part of the collection got put in the cupboard and didn't see the light of day until a few years ago when I decided to resurrect it. I thought it looked quite pretty. So as Ian kindly explained this morning, in some ways this is an easy-ish exercise to do in Gold Coast, because prior to the key plates there were only 4 smallish issues of stamps, consisting of 3, 5, 2 and 9 stamps, so not many. And the postmarks listed in those days, I think still the same, there were 11 Victorian postmarks. So what I've tried to do is collect the same postmark on every value, of the 9 values, mainly on the 1884 issue, which is the easiest issue to tackle it on, as it only goes up to 2 shillings. I think Sierra Leone has 10 shillings, don't they?
5.
5? That sounds a bit more expensive. So the easiest and the most attractive to collect, which is my view, are the small circular date stamps, known by Gold Coast collectors as types 2 and type 5. And at this moment in time, doesn't sound much for 50 years, does it? But I've managed to complete 9 villages, and 1 on the key plate, the first key plate, to 10 shillings. I'm still looking. I don't do a daily eBay like some people do, but I still keep a lookout for postmarks. And I'd like to say that the said Mr. Anderson has been quite helpful over the last few years. He's got a very substantial, what do you call it, your duplicates, that's the word I'm looking for. And all I will say is that some villages, especially the type 5s, that they're I find those quite difficult, mainly because they had a pretty short shelf life. Some of them for only 2 or 3 years. I'm going to point out one item. Obviously these are all used because they're postmarks, and I have one of the 1901 surcharges on the 6pence with the 1 omitted, and this is the one that came from the Colonel Danson collection, via somewhere else I think, but that was in his collection. I have a query. This might sound a load of gobbledygook, but somebody who collects Gold Coast might be able to help. In the old monographs, there was reference to a postmark which went .bu.I. And this is mentioned both by Cameron and by McRae, and Proud lists it under a bury, as though they're missing letters. And it's also mentioned in these monographs that it also could be Obuasi, with letters missing. Now, I was reading a Gold Coast book during the year, and the town buoy cropped up. Now, on my Gold Coast map, which is about 8 feet by 4 feet, which hangs in the wall of my study, I actually found buoy, which is a ferry on the Black Gibraltar. So the question for all you Gold Coast collectors is this buoy on the ferry on the Black Gibraltar anything to do with this buoy cancel, or are we still back to the theory of the missing letters? So there you are, there's one observation and one query, so thank you very much.
Just hold on.
Just hold.
Just hold it, it's fine.
Hello, everyone. Some postmarks from Freetown, Sierra Leone, maybe some of the later ones. First page, so there's a photograph of the post office, was opened way back in 1843 or so. There's typical stamps, typical postmarks from the main post office. So like these are other postmarks. There was a garrison at Freetown from early in the 20th century, I think. And they had their own counter at the Freetown post office. They used this oval mark, which is relatively unusual. Later on, simpler date stamps. As Freetown grew in size, like everywhere else did in the 1950s, there was a need then for other post offices. So apart from the main one, there was one open at Freetown Quay, which is down the docks where the Elder Dempster ships came in. Post office open Freetown West, Freetown East, and also included the airport, which is on the other side of the Sierra Leone River estuary. That was Lungi Airport. I've got postmarks there for that one. Mount Oriel, which is a suburb of Freetown. But curious enough, at the Datestown Street, Mount Oriel, the registered label reads FB College. It's Farrer Bay. That's where the university was. You don't get Farrer Bay circa date stamps, and you don't get Mount Oriel registered labels. The last one is New England. That was another suburb of Freetown. So that's my contribution, just a few Freetown postmarks. So thank you.
Thank you very much. When we were contemplating a Salisbury meeting earlier this year, about 2 months before that, I thought, I better try to put together something, and it was rates and revenues, I think, if I remember the theme. So I started digging out what I might have on mail that was underpaid from Nigeria. You might expect that to be fairly voluminous, being Nigeria. And also mail that had express labels on it in some form or another. As I got into that, I thought I got to the end of my express mail write-up. I'd done about 100 sheets by that stage, and then suddenly I found I'd still got several other batches of it around, which was another 100. So that's a project in progress, shall we say. Likewise, the to paid items, I thought I was getting to the end, and then I found I got another album full of them to write up. So that's also an item in progress. But what I did manage to complete, I think, is airmail, insufficiently paid airmail. And I brought that along here. First point I would make is it's not such a common cachet as some of the others. And there's quite a few different versions of that cachet. And also the ones that I seem to have don't necessarily accord with ones that Jones recorded at the back of his book. It's a bit of an appendix, an addendum at the back of his book, just with examples of the insufficiently paper airmail caches, various versions of that. Some of what he illustrates, I can't find a single example in what I'm holding at the moment. In other cases, I think I've got some which he doesn't illustrate. But anyway, that's what those two frames are all about. Moving on, this is material which is Barbara's material, really, but she's brought it in for me to take back to make copies of and then return. It's press releases and the like regarding Biafra, ones that came out at the same time as the war was taking place. And also a couple of examples of a magazine called Venture, which is associated with socialism and the developing world, is its second title, published by the Fabian Society. But I can't tell you what the contents of that is at the moment, but please have a look at it and you will make some discoveries. Thank you.
Thank you all. That concludes the final session. So we have the opportunity to view. And thank you, Ray, for trying to get us online. It will work next time.
Yes, and there'll be some things as a residue of this that we can look at.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Tony, I've got quite a lot to do. Yeah, what I should do is see how it goes. Yes, because we need to do it right. It's a monograph. Yes, there is something written on it. Jones. Yes, it's text, no, it's text version. Yeah, so we should do a monograph. We can do it jointly. Yeah.
It wasn't.
What good have you got here?
It was the Empire scheme, so they brought it. I mean, you can send stuff to Malaysia or where have you. Certainly you can send it to East Africa, but not to us.
Thank you.
I think they have to join some sort of scheme. And what was the name of it?
You've got more than mine.
Oh, big, in there. In 1937, I think it is, I think it was the Americans, yes. Yes, was it, this was all up there. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they weren't too careful.
It's nasty backstabbed, I'll say that. What did they do? Did they actually send it? No. July 37. Well, they did it.
Yes.
Yes.
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question.
Scotch.
No, the charge in there.
Depends.
I think you did say that because it was the early stages, they might have been a bit unsure as to what was.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I can understand the
Yes.
conclusion with the Scottish coastlines where it came from.
Right.
But surely that would have gone to London and had the rest of them.
And you would have thought
Somebody would have
somewhere.
picked it up there.
You would, yes.
Gavin Fry, who's got a big career,
Yes.
goes back to said maybe there was some confusion because it went on a route on which some of the places were in Spain.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Answer to one question, why was this, why were those West Africa never on the heavy rate?
I think because they were too busy paying back all the money they borrowed